Well, here we are again in our 4 priorities series, and we're going to be looking today at chapter number 13, and the title is Depression or Joy. I'm reading from one of my favorite books, There's a Lot More to Health Than Being Sick by Bruce Larson. It's kind of an old book, but it's a great one, and I love Bruce. And he said in the introduction, in a recent survey, the American Medical Association asked several thousand general practitioners across the country, what percentage of people that you see in a week have needs that you are qualified to treat with your medical skills? Some replied 25%, some 1%, but the average was 10%. In other words, by their estimate, 90% of the people who see a general practitioner in an average week have no medically treatable problem. Certainly, they're ill and suffering real pain, but their problem is not chemical or physical and defies normal medical procedure. The survey went on to ask what the doctor did for these people. Most of the respondents said that they prescribed tranquilizers such as Valium, and when asked what they would like to do for these people, most of the doctors said that they would like to have had time to spend an hour a week talking to these patients about their lives, their families, and their jobs. Absolutely remarkable. There's a great passage in John chapter number 15 that I want to refer to, and actually it's not John 15, it's John chapter 5, verses 1 through 14. And I'm just going to read the first few verses. You may remember this story. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethsaida, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" Now, you know, I've read that passage and taught on that passage many times over the years, and the first few times I read it, even as I've studied it many other times, I always ask myself, why did Jesus ask that question? Do you want to get well? Certainly the man wanted to get well. But you know, the more I thought about it, the more I've talked to other people about this, what I've learned is that some people don't want to get well. Some people get used to the pity party that is thrown for them. In fact, I might add that when you have a pity party, probably the only person that's going to come is you. Think about that. And they get used to perhaps not taking on any responsibilities. So again, we assume that everybody wants to get well, they want to get out of the hospital, but maybe not. Maybe there are reasons why they have grown comfortable in their sickness. Hans Seeley originally laughed at the medical world. It is reported, is now an honored prophet by what he said years ago. From his point of view, stress is the #1 cause of illness. According to Seeley, everybody has stress, but how you deal with the stress in your life will determine how well you are and how long you live. Seeley's prescription for avoiding stress and maintaining health includes eating sensibly, getting lots of rest, and exercise, but most of his advice does not sound at all medical. He suggests things like pacing yourself, talking out your troubles, developing an outgoing disposition, having fun. And so think about that. Basic things: eating right, resting right, exercising right, pacing yourself, talking out your problems, having fun, laughing a lot. Listen, depression is a serious issue. And probably everyone on the planet during their lifetime will experience some degree of depression. We're not talking about clinical depression here. We're talking about just the blue funks. Getting in those frames of mind in which you feel like the clouds always fly over your house, over your life, over your party, over what you're trying to accomplish in life. Just getting down and not feeling like everything is clicking on all 8 cylinders. So a couple of things I want us to remember today as we briefly talk about this whole idea of depression and joy. And by the way, I'd a whole much rather experience joy than I would depression. But there are things that we can even learn when we go through those depressing times. First of all, we live, remember, in a fallen world. If you read Genesis chapter 3, you will see at least 4 things happen as a result of Adam and Eve, those first people, being disobedient to the Lord, that have impacted you and me. Number 1, we're cut off from God. When you're cut off from the God of the universe, the God that made us, we're susceptible then to a lot of things impacting negatively our lives. Secondly, we're cut off from ourselves. There's no one on the planet who psychologically or mentally or any other way has it perfectly all together. The fall, the estrangement, being cut off from God has impacted us personally. Thirdly, we're cut off from other people. So if you're cut off from God and cut off from yourself, and that's not exactly right, then how in the world do we think people are going to come together in that state or that condition and everything's going to be just great? It's not going to be great. And then the fourth thing, everything in creation has been thrown off kilter, so that now there are germs, there is mental illness, we're susceptible to all kinds of disease, etc., etc. So that's the first thing. You've got to remember the fall. Secondly, when you, or if you have, asked Jesus to come into your life and take up residence in you, you need to remember he accepts you just like you are. He loves you deeply. He indwells you through the Holy Spirit. Even though all that transpires in the life of an individual that has Jesus living in them, you can still get depressed. And we need to understand that. And so therefore, in this life, and this is the key thing I want you to remember here, in this life, as a follower of Jesus Christ, you can experience significant wholeness, but not complete wholeness. Not until we go home to be with the Lord will we become whole and perfect and complete as a result of him finishing the job that he started in us. You might want to check out Philippians 1:6, where Jesus said, or where Paul says, that good thing which he, the Lord, started in you, he will complete it on that day when we will be 100% home and 100% all of what he wants us to be. A number of years ago, I read an article about a man named Norman Cousins. Norman Cousins, again, was a man who went through a lot of difficulty and challenges physically in his life. And Norman Cousins was the former editor of the Saturday Review. And in his best-selling book, Anatomy of an Illness, as perceived by the patient, isn't that a great title? Anatomy of an Illness as perceived by the patient. This is how it goes. A dozen years ago, when Cousins returned from Europe with a non-treatable illness that left him paralyzed and immovable, he was told by his physician that his chances for recovery were 1 in 500. Not good odds. Cousins asked the doctor's permission to treat his own illness. His first move was out of the hospital and into a hotel. He reasoned that a hospital was not only full of germs and expensive, but a patient is treated at the convenience of the staff. Tucked away in his comfortable hotel room, he began to read up on stress and take massive doses of vitamin C. He took time to straighten out some of the primary relationships in his life. Now notice the steps that he took here. Somewhere he had read that laughter was therapeutic, so he decided to program a laugh time for himself every day. He sent out for old Marx Brothers movies, and he had his friend Alan Funk send over old reruns of Candid Camera. For 2 hours of every day, he watched funny movies. The monitoring machines by his bed indicated that after 2 hours of belly laughing, all his vital signs improved dramatically. 10 minutes of belly laughing gave me, he said, an hour of pain-free sleep. His sedimentation rate came down 10 points at a time, he says, and the more I laughed, the better I got. In time, his symptoms disappeared, and he returned to work. Amazing. And now we're not saying that that kind of thing is going to cure the depression that you might be experiencing, but it might help. All depends what kind it is and how deeply ingrained that is in your life. I love the passage in Hebrews chapter 4. 14 through 16. Listen to this. Inasmuch then as we have a great high priest who has already ascended and passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our confession of faith in him. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to understand and sympathize and have a shared feeling with our weaknesses and infirmities and liabilities to the assaults of temptation, but who has been tempted in every respect as we are, yet without sinning. Verse 16, let us then fearlessly and confidently and boldly draw near to the throne of grace, the throne of God's unmerited favor to us sinners, that we may receive mercy for our failures, find grace to help in good time for every need, appropriate help and well-timed help coming just when we need it. The last thing I'd say is, reminding of what Norman Cousins said, and what many of my friends say, remember to have fun, remember to laugh. One of my good friends, Steve Brown, noted this in a recent newsletter that I received from him. He said, a friend of mine sent me the story about a lady who worked for an orthopedic surgeon moving into a new office. His staff helps transport many of the items from the old office to the new one. The staff member, among other things, was charged with transporting the display skeleton. She placed the skeleton in the front passenger seat of her car with his bony arm across the back of the seat. As she drove across town, she stopped at a light, looked to her left, and noticed that the man in the car next to her had a shocked expression on his face. By way of explanation, she yelled out the window, I'm delivering him to my doctor's office. Lady, he said, I think it's too late. Okay, it was too late for that patient, but it isn't for us. You see, he puts relationships back together. He brings hope into our lives. He gives us purpose. He gives us meaning. He gives us power to live differently and to face all the things of life. His presence is with us constantly. And so, remember, God puts the bones back together, then the flesh, then those restored skeletons dance again. Don't forget them bones. You think about that real hard.